destination for the iciest cold takes from the frozen wastelands of the north. I'm your host, Charles Constantine, and with me is NP. Say hello, NP.
Hello! There we go. Boy, my
Hello.
audio was all over the map there.
So, are we back now?
We're so back.
Nice.
Oh,
It's been a while.
I suspect this music's getting irritating in the background. I don't know. Not as usual, or, the best production in the world, but we make it work.
Whatever. It's good.
I
We're
think
fine.
everyone can hear both of us now. There's no of Eschatonic Eternals. Good music in the background. We've got some people watching on YouTube. We got some people watching from Telegram. So yeah. Well,
Sweet. Well, it's been a while. Where have we been?
oh, I've been everywhere, man. I've been to Watrous. I've been to Miata. I've been to Turtleford.
Oh yeah.
I've been as far as, I'll say, Love.
Wow. I went to Walmart once.
Did you? Did you get yourself a McDouble while you were in there?
No, there's no. It's not. I didn't say McDonald's. I said Walmart. There's no McDonald's in my Walmart. So
Oh, wow. That's should be illegal, frankly.
yeah, I don't know what the world's coming to these days. But yeah, no, I've been grinding. I've been gone every weekend, and I've been yeah, just up and working. Not much time for things.
Yeah, I've been working like a dog. I got engaged since our last episode to the hippie girl.
Whoa! Congrats, nice job, man.
Yes. Now I'm just saving up. I just did my first budget at the ripe age of 37 in my entire life.
That's usually when you that's usually the first time you get that done.
Yeah. It turns out that if I don't smoke or drink or go anywhere, I can retire when I'm 72.
Well, that's not bad at all. I know plenty of people that are still working at 74. So
Yeah, it's hard keeping him away. What's been new with you? What have you been up to actually?
literally just work and getting a whole bunch of personal like just things in line. Just new things up every day. It's you get one thing comes up and then you focus all your energy on getting that and then other things pile up behind it. And then once you get the first thing done, well then now you're grinding away to get those things that piled up done. So
That's how she goes.
the way she goes.
We got a lot of we got a lot of topics to cover now since it's been so long, and it turns out Conte Saint came true in the last few days.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I saw that. Yeah, I think it would be good to briefly touch on that. It's not necessarily Canada Day related,
And we're
but
gonna
there is some. We do have Quebec here, so I guess there's a little bit of that French tie-in. I mean, the main thing with Quebec, or sorry, the France situation is, I mean, I don't think it's anything more than what anyone in this space already knows. It's like, you let in a bunch of resentful people, and you don't hold them to any standards, and then you tell them, "Hey, you guys have every right to be demanding more because you're unfairly treated." And then, well, what happens given a long enough time frame? I mean, it wasn't even really that long, and boom, things start burning.
well. I hope they can bring it to a swift and merciless conclusion.
Yeah, and I think it's important also to not get too over black pilled, I guess, about it, because again, you see just the videos from the areas that things are going down, and it looks terrible. But a lot of that, again, is just confined to specific areas within the country and within cities. It's not like it's every part per part of the country is looking like that. So it can feel overblown. So I don't think you need to go like total accelerationist on this because that's not necessarily what's happening. You could have a more measured take. I have seen one interesting um, point of view. I forget where I saw this. Someone was suggesting that uh, French people could become refugees and flee to flee to Quebec. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that is. It's funny that that will always be an option. I think Quebecois would actually accept French refugees if things got severe enough. I don't know if what your thoughts on that are, but that's something I saw floating around.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Uh, Charles, how do you feel about taking an early caller here?
Sure, yeah, like I'm done. I'm done with that. So we can take a caller before we jump onto the couple things that I wanted to touch on for the Canada Day.
Old Sweepy, you're on the air. This ought to be good. Notorious shit disturber, Old Sweepy. You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, so I got a Case 586E forklift, and it won't stay running, and it got good spark, but I don't know what to do.
Well, you're gonna need to first of all remove the casing, and then remove each spark plug one by one and just clean them, and then don't forget to
They
re-gap them
they
properly.
they look like well cooked toast.
Yeah, you're just go to your local Princess Auto and pick yourself up some replacements. Just grab the serial number maybe off the top of them there if they got them
What
stamped on
what
there.
what what
Oh,
the fuck is a Princess Auto?
do you guys not have that down there? What do you guys go to get your
No,
shitty car parts?
we had the auto zone, but they burned it.
Okay, what you're going to want to do is find a derelict model of the same forklift as you have, sitting in a pile of rubble. Get a pry bar, crank his hood open, and remove its spark plugs and trade them out with your own.
Okay, I do that and call back.
Yes, please do. All right, thanks for calling in,
Good
Old
luck.
Sweepy. That's
Right. Well,
exactly what I expected.
um, I'm glad that's what we're here for, really, is answering those tough questions. I mean, I kind of answer that, but I'm glad you had an answer.
Yeah, it probably lacked a few details. I'm a little rusty on auto maintenance, but hopefully he'll get that sorted out.
That's one thing that we can research, so we keep the audience happy and informed on all their car care needs.
Yeah, I've got to get new tires myself, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well, good luck.
they're so bald they're gonna be cast in the remake of American History X.
Well, that's one way. That's one way to put it. Okay, so it's Canada Day. It is Canada Day. Happy Canada Day, by the way.
Happy Canada Day, such as it is. I don't think we have to go over the usual spiel of our complicated relationship to this thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that was one thing I wanted to, again, not hit on that specific thing, but just say, like, I like Canada. Canada's awesome. I mean, I don't know why you would bitch and moan about Canada. You live in a great country, regardless. It's got a great history, and there's still good Canadians in every part of the country. So you just got to be happy for what you have and look for those people and surround yourself by those good Canadians. That's really the key here.
Yes, um, it's hard to surround yourself in good Canadians if you're kind of hiding your power level. But if you just like crack it open a little bit, like at work, my entire division is just a bunch of old Saskies. So I got to talk about fish and snowmobiling a lot. But do you know what? That suits me just fine. And
Yeah.
you know, depending on whether we're work or not, depends what kind of jokes you can make, but that's no big deal either.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, you don't even have to do any power level type of real stuff. You can just be a normal person and like a good guy, and again, everything will come through, and you'll have a great time. It's once you're kind of centered in that you, just that like Canadian atmosphere, where you're just around like old stock. Even if they're younger people, there's still a old stock vibe to a lot of people within the country, and you just have to be out there with them and just sort of immerse yourself in it. And it's so much better when you're immersed within something that is really familiar, because I find it really easy to get caught up in like internet notions and popular notions of Canada being this just complete hellscape, and then you find yourself resenting the average people around you because you just think they're all libtards. But that's not really what it is. That's only you projecting that onto the people around you. When you don't project that popularized view of it, then you find like, oh no, it's actually really awesome still. There's still a lot of really great things to find. There's still a lot of wholesome experiences to be had with the people around you.
I had a pretty good one at work the other day.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I, Everyone gets Bing, and it's one of corporate's 3-4 emails of the day, and this one's about like using inclusive language. So, guy
Oh yeah.
across from me, call him Jay. He turns around and goes, "What exactly is inclusive language?" I'm like, we can't even really discuss that here. Like, you don't even want to, like, basically don't
Mm-hmm.
offend anybody. And we get in a big discussion, everyone in my group, and eventually I'm like, well, really, it all started 14 years ago, and I could just like feel myself like starting to rumble down the tracks. I'm just like, nope, nope, no, I'm trying to hold it back, but the locomotive's out of the station, right? Like, and they're
Yeah.
just like, well, what happened 14 years ago? And I was like, well, that's when women got phones, and they're just like, whoa, okay, well, okay, whoa. Everyone instantly somehow knew what I meant. But they were just like, yeah, okay. Like everyone turned back to their desks and started working again. But they're having a good chuckle.
I find those moments happen more and more. Honestly, like you just be out for dinner with your regular buddies, and then suddenly someone uh just pop off with something like, man, those Indians, those Packy guys that I got to work with, they're really getting on my nerves. And other guys like, yeah, I've had the exact same experience, and then they just go off.
Um, on the other hand, I have been chided for saying jokes that I feel are not even remotely edgy. But they're edgy is because they're accidentally edgy from the different direction. I'll use an old Red
Uh,
Fox joke, or like
yeah, yeah,
like just a 100-year-old joke about how maybe like my wife can't cook, right? Oh, and now I guess
right.
implying that millennial girls can't cook. No, 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 no. Be careful of that too.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was so tame that it couldn't even like register, but it's very
No, you know
peculiar.
what?
What's
There's a certain like I don't know what you'd call it, a certain threshold where stuff that should be really offensive and edgy, like no one bats an eye at, and then stuff that's just completely mundane, and you'd think, who cares? People like that's when they come after you. It's a weird bandwidth that we're working with. I've found it like totally totally been reshaped in the last 5 years. It used to be everything like don't step anywhere near that, and then now it's just you can get away with crazy edgy stuff that you thought everyone would be losing their mind at, and then there's still just those little things, those outdated jokes. Those are the ones, the boomer jokes that get people mad. I don't know what it is.
well, there's actually not much shock there because a lot of the political quote unquote correctness that was invented was specifically designed to remove old head boomers who are speaking out of turn.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
to not really, but you know, That's why they're like so hard on like gendered language and
Right.
things like this. But like our, the Zoomer witticisms and all that will probably fly under the radar for the most part. They won't even know what you're talking about most of the time. Uh,
Yeah, that's true. That is true. You can. They've. I think we mentioned this on the show quite a bit, where it's like they don't even keep up with the flow of the meme language, where it just accelerates so fast that you can't write some paper on what the meaning of a thing is until the new thing is already there.
one thing we were talking about, or these guys will kind of complain about like the crime in their area, or someone broke into someone's car or whatever, or stole a catalytic converter. And my go-to joke now is just like, I could solve this all in 2 weeks, and they always laugh.
Yeah, yeah.
No, they don't want me to elaborate, I'm sure, but
No,
you can get away with it if you're funny. They let you do it.
it's so true. Should be a little funny, a little charming, and it all flies right by. Now back to the topic, Canada Day and Canada. In my time over the past few months, I've been got a little bit of extra reading done in Canadian history, and I came across some interesting things I wanted to talk about. And considering it's Canada Day, might as well dive into them. So I'm just gonna bounce them off you, and see what you think about 'em. Um, there's one thing I was reading this one Canadian history book, and it really jumped to me, and it was the fact that before Confederation, the maritime provinces really didn't have any interaction between each other. So they were all just doing their own thing. Um, Basically, even though today we see them as like this unified block and we project that back onto the past, that really was never the case. The Maritimes each had their own um, specific challenges and goals in mind, and they were completely isolated from the other maritime provinces. And really did not care what was going on there. Like no one in Nova Scotia cared about what was going on in New Brunswick. They were just completely isolated, and it was really only Confederation and when all of those provinces were brought into the Union, or that they they became known and interacted as a unified bloc. But that was, again, that's a more recent development. Most of Canadian history has not had those provinces um, any sort of connection with each other,
It's
and
hard
that
to
was sort of
imagine how Nova Scotia and New Brunswick could be not linked, you know?
yeah, yeah. So I the one thing I was thinking with this, and because it's true for other provinces too. I mean, to the extent that the Western provinces were really that connected to the Eastern provinces in the early days before Confederation. I mean, obviously they weren't that connected, and how would you connect them, right? They were out doing their own things, completely different challenges and worries, um, and it was always the Eastern provinces trying to project into the Western provinces. Um, in the early days, it was for growth, so that they could actually claim that land, and then only after Confederation did it became dictating what was done in those provinces. Um, but basically, what my takeaway from a lot of this is majority of Canadian history is each of these blocks really operating based on what they need in their area. Because I mean, yeah, a lot of these provinces are the size of European countries, so why wouldn't they? Especially in the 19th century or the 18th century or the 17th century, why would they have any notion of collective unity? Because I mean, it's just like in Europe, you're in this massive land space, all on your own, pretty much isolated, and there's no mass communication for you to be immediately interacting. So if even the smallest provinces that are huddled in the Maritimes were not that connected, um, and it's but the historical reality of Canada is, why would there be this inherent connection across the board? And I'm not saying there's no uh, common Canadian identity, for example. But what I am saying is that the notion that everything needs to be tightly integrated was not the historical reality of Canada. So I found that interesting.
Yeah. What sort of things do you think happened to kind of unite these varying colonies?
Well, the two main things in Confederation was like the trade aspect. Like, we got to make sure we can get the resources from across the province, and then we had to unify so that we can be our own thing, somewhat separate from the British Empire. And then it was competition with America too. Like in the 1850s, when the first gold rush in BC started coming like to light. Well, obviously the East, Ontario, Upper Canada, they wanted like they did not want America to stake the claims that they had found in BC. So they needed to do everything they could to bring British Columbia under the domain of um, Upper Canada. So there's a lot of that impetus of the competition with America that made the unification a necessity in that time frame. So there was that those mostly um, economical interests.
If you've
Um,
played EU4, then you know exactly what's going on there.
and then the greater development of the identity, I think, came after World War One, where you're actually fighting as a unified country, and you have people from multiple different provinces called to this conflict, and then from there you get a real strong solidification of a unified Canada, even stronger than after Confederation, I would say. So those are the main factors that contributed to that, and then obviously coming in with the mass age, the electronic age, bringing in those means of communicating instantly, then you could build this broader notion of a unified Canada like that. Those are the main things that came into play. But again, that's really only a product of our current age, right? And then that quickly dissipated by the 70s.
It Canada truly was only a nation under the statesmanship of such legends as John A. Macdonald and Laurier and their ilk. There was only a brief period of time where we could carry that kind of thing off. Um, Even like the language issues in school was something that was rectified quite ably by our government in the 30s. Now, I mean, just hopeless. Uh, but also, there was no question at all to like where the higher loyalty was. Uh, we were like, so, old Sweepy's saying he heard my smoke detector beep. I swear to God, it did not.
Yeah, I did hear a beep. Definitely did.
Oh, well, it's not the smoke detector, or if it is, then I'm gonna die in a fire. I did light a garbage pail on fire yesterday with my cigarette, so it's not impossible.
Yeah, yeah. But you'll change it right away, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah,
The whole point is that you heard the beep, and now you'll change it.
as soon as I'm done this brick of cornstarch, I'm gonna go change that. What the hell was I just saying? It doesn't matter.
Anyways, well, you said something about it being hopeless. I wouldn't say it's hopeless, but it's just an aspect of, I think, again, as George Grant points out in the Lament for a Nation and the decline of Canadian nationalism through the 60s. And so after that period, what we see Canada as this unified bloc being is, this economic zone, right? That's a common take. Canada is an economic zone, and that's what they turned it into. And then you had the remnant of that collective identity continue on up to the 2000s, where then you had this potent, this development of a post-nation state um, start to seep in from the 2000s onward. And now we are where we are. Um, but that's really the key: is all of that development of a notion of a collective identity stops as soon as you say, well, now we just need to maximize the GDP. We need to have more productivity. We need more economic units. Doesn't matter who those economic units are, just as long as we can bring people in and sort people into these productive classes, turn them into something that makes us money as a country. And being a country, that's what I find interesting about the post nation state. You take away the notion of a nation and it's just a state, and all it does is just a state for economic production. That's it. There's no people. So that's what that broad unification of Canada ultimately ended up. I don't think it was a necessity. It was just the reality of the American influence on Canada. But what that does bring about is the reality that there was in the original settling of the country, this these localized identities that had their own interests at stake, regardless of the machinations of the greater powers around them. And that was always what was rooted in the identity of the people, regardless if they felt completely unified just by virtue of being on a new continent. They always had a local and communal focus around them.
What, I'm in the last remnants. My job is a Dilbert job that should have been it's like a fossil. It should have been dead. It's a coelacanth. It's the last discovered cubicle job. And the people around me are much the same. They're just like, what economic troubles? Desjardins is managing my funds just fine. You have to watch out for those. If you over contribute to your TFSA, then it can certainly bite you in being taxable. I'm just, what are you guys? What? It's not even English. Like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I don't have a skidoo, nor could I afford one. I don't have a place to put it, nor could I afford it. I like to drink and fish as much as you guys, but our troubles are not the same. You're worried about whether you should reseed or just aerate your lawn this year, and I'm worried if, 6 chugs are going to come and break into my car and steal what few possessions I have left. I don't know. I love my Sasky brethren, and I love Canada and the Canada that was, but I see that it's disappeared, and I can see it because I'm in the last group that doesn't realize it.
Mm-hmm. But I think with the value in understanding that there was this, in the primordial development of Canada, there was a very strong local identity, and that can come back because you don't need to have the absolute government, the federal government, on your side to be working within your community, right? That's what it comes back down
Absolutely.
to. And I think it will always work within the context of Canada, regardless of what goes on, regardless of whatever decline we lament. We always had that just by virtue of being in the nation that we're in, because it is this, or was the product of conquering a wilderness that was completely uninhabitable.
Do you know what always strikes me of all our conversations we've had over the episodes of our podcast? What a scrub Darcy McGee was. Like, do you see that guy?
Yeah.
He
looks like...
Yeah. He looks like he doesn't change his smoke detector battery once.
I don't know, he's just like a guy.
He looks like... It's because of the photography of the age, but he looks like a caricature of an Irishman from an English newspaper in 1832. And he was. But I'm just thinking, if that guy can get his act together, then surely we can.
Oh, yeah. That brings me to this other thing I was reading about, an interesting aspect of the development of Canada too, and why can't like people always ask, well, why did Canada not develop into the superpower that America did? And there's like many reasons. I think America, climate-wise, has some advantages on that aspect,
America's not shaped like
and
a snake.
yeah, and yeah, like there's so much more to the land, and Canada is actually just uninhabitable. Like I
Yeah.
think I was reading that we have like 300 billion trees. Like it's just
We have
forests,
we have something
forests
like
forever.
20 miles of grid road to maintain for every person in this country. It's probably not true, but it's something absurd.
No,
like
it's
that.
I mean, but it's a lot. And like
It's
again, like if you look at northern Manitoba, for example, it's just lakes and swamps everywhere, and then like tundra.
it could only be
So there's so
maintained
much.
by the most capable engineers, logicians, and like community-oriented people. Nothing short of that would succeed.
Yeah.
Never mind
But
tying
then
it
there's
to a nation.
yeah. Well, and then there's another aspect too. When I was reading about this, is that a lot of so like the French farmers, for example, the habitants, from like the 1600s when they got here and they settled along the St. Lawrence, and their farming was largely just subsistence farming, and it was just communal living, and there wasn't much impetus to develop or industrialize or push technological advancements. They just did their thing in their communities, and they were content with that. Because a lot of them came from being complete outcasts in France, and so this reestablished new culture. Not a completely new culture, but largely in France in the 16th century, you had
Well, think about it. Who's gonna go to the New World to go collect beaver pelts? It's the exact same guys who are gonna go to Alberta to work the fucking tar sands. There's no
Well, yeah,
difference
yeah.
whatsoever to that. You're taking a shit job with awesome pay because it's your absolute best line to riches, given your status and situation.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people that were just the ninth child with no inheritance, or orphan children, people that grew up in orphanages, and they just left, and then so they had to basically start something new. But then they were content with what they had. There wasn't much impetus to develop. Now,
Well, they were
when
content once they sent the fille de roi.
yeah, well, like that, yeah. Now, when the British came, and when they settled, and they sort of pushed the French out of the way, and they ultimately succeeded in the French Indian War. Um, won the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, but even the British that were in Canada did not have as much of a impetus to develop and change, like the Americans did. Many of the British farmers, specifically actually the Scots Irish, they stuck to the same model of farming, the fallow farming, and the very basic rotations. They didn't develop the more advanced crop rotations that were going on in the States. It was the Loyalists when they left after the American War of Independence. When the Loyalists came up and they settled along the Great Lakes region, it was them that brought the new farming technologies and pushed for greater development within Upper Canada, and that's what spurred on some industrialization in Upper Canada, because everyone else that was there was really just sticking to what they like to do, never going too advanced, and just being content with mostly subsistence. So when we talk about Canada not developing in the same way that America did, it was largely just people that were more content just to live within their communities than to be constantly pushing the pace. And I think that's still an aspect that is present within Canadians, where there isn't necessarily a need to constantly push the limit of development and uh, improve productivity, and we need more gains. That's sort of antithetical to a lot of the early settlers that we're descended from. um, and that I would say that gives us somewhat of an advantage in an age where you're not guaranteed as much as uh, your ancestors were.
I see where you're coming from. The American dream is something like, work hard, make a fortune. The Canadian dream is something like, work hard, hope you don't get, shot in the ass. It lends itself better to hard times for sure.
Yeah, and it's sort of this temperament that where you are able to just be content with whatever your lot is, and I mean that's sort of necessary to live in a extremely harsh, unforgiving environment too. And with that also came a greater desire for order, where you like the stability. You don't necessarily want the free roaming Wild West approach. You want strong communities that are very high trust and are stable, nothing more. And I think that's sort of, at least from what I'm seeing, that's what a lot of Canadians have this desire for is let's take that stability and security and let's reform communities that look stable and secure.
The disadvantage to this mindset is just the exact same thing as I was saying about the people at work. That desire for stability, usually most people see what they wish for. They don't see the world as it is. They
Mm-hmm.
see what they wish for. And so they're unable to see that there's troubles, or they kind of hand wave them away as, millennials, or that, this, whatever. Americans are a little more trigger happy and are able to see, like, that's the trouble, let's jump on it. That sucks. Canadians will, in their desire for steadfastness and order, will fail to notice troubles. Or feel maybe arrogantly like we can just consist by the strength of our virtues through them. In fact, I think I said so even just 6 sentences earlier in this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's true now. But again, when you look at the historical Canada, you see strong arm of the law coming down hard. I mean, remember way back when we read that one little
Absolutely, yeah. Where he goes to
Canada when
the
we
camp and he
yeah,
punches
yeah,
out the guy and he
the
gets
Mountie.
slightly sanctioned.
Yeah, exactly. But even like if you look at the Klondike Gold Rush, they had that whole place. The Mounties had that whole place locked down. Actually, the namesake Charles Constantine was uh, the guy that was overseeing the Klondike Gold Rush at the time, and it was like no nonsense. Like you didn't even he didn't even necessarily have to, at least from what I was reading this book on the Klondike Gold Rush by Tapan Adney. Um, he was saying that people would just not even act out of line because they didn't want they didn't want to have to deal with Charles Constantine, um, because you just didn't and they never had to do much. The Mounties, it was just by mere notoriety that they kept things in check there. Um, Stealing gold from a person on the claim next to you would bring you less fortune um, than just sticking to your own thing because
Because
you got
Charles
caught. Like,
Constantine would assure that that was the case.
yeah, well, and even the other miners, like if someone had found out, if some other miner in the camp had found out you had been the one, stealing from the bags at night, it'd be everyone's business to deal with you because your whole productivity, the whole operation depended upon every single person there sticking to their own claim and not jumping out of order. Because one thing goes out of line, and then suddenly you have guys digging and stealing from claims that aren't their own, and there's no way that anyone profits off that. And they all understood that, and so they all kept in line. So there was a history of that notion, seeing the disorder and nipping it in the bud right before or far before anything could step out of line.
Again, I think we have to turn to their rigs as a modern day example. You have a bunch of cocaine addicts and deviants, 22-year-old men who whore and drink every night of their lives away and still wake up at 5 a.m. to go, throw pipe. And there's never really any trouble. There's not major troubles on the job site. All the troubles are off of it. It's just understood that if you don't fuck with the golden goose.
Yep. And then there's the other aspect of the gold rush too, where it was just so difficult to get there. I mean, have you ever heard about the process of actually getting to the Klondike
Only
at the
in
time of the
Jack
rush?
London. But yeah, it's a big sled ride. It's a long sled ride.
Well, it wasn't just that. So the whole process from start to finish was like there are a lot of Americans there. So for an American to get there, you had to, you'd leave California, usually California or Seattle, and you'd come up, you'd stop in Vancouver. And here's the other thing too: you had because you're changing borders, you would have to deal with the customs, right? So then customs at Vancouver, then you'd end up going up north to the border of the Yukon. But if you remember, there's that sliver of the Alaskan border that comes down. So after stopping in Canada at Vancouver, you end up having to go through Alaska so that you can get to the Yukon on the other side. So then now you're going back to America, customs again, then back to Canada, customs again. Um, then you end up having to haul all of your gear over several mountain passes through brutal trails, muddy trails, and then down into the valleys where you can hop on the series of rivers that takes you up to Dawson City. Now, what most people don't realize is that to get there, you actually had to have your own boat so you could traverse the river. So what these guys had to do was they had to actually carry as luggage an entire boat, like all the pieces of a boat, all the wood for a full boat, and that was somewhat durable and that could haul several tons of gear and supplies down a river. So they had to have all the gear they needed, and they needed to carry a whole boat, and they needed to do this over mountain passes, muddy mountain passes, scaling some cliffs even, and then had to build a boat at the first river site, and then haul their stuff down a boat through rapids, through canyon passes, through cliff sides,
So,
and then all the
even in
way to
those days,
Dawson.
given how tough guys are, there's not much chance they're doing that without a guide, I would imagine. You gotta have some knowledge, you
No,
gotta have some.
no. Most people just did it on their own.
You find
Most
out when
people
you get
couldn't,
there. Build your boat.
because yeah, you basically be a guy, and if you were smart, I think you need to have a minimum of like $2,000 worth of, again, $2,000 in that time frame, worth of food and supplies for them to even let you go. And then so very wealthy people, um, yeah, they would have a full guide set up, full horse stack, everything. But the average guy was just reckless and just went, and very many of them just did not make it at all. Most people gave up on the first pass. I mean, people would have their horses fall off the cliff sides as they were climbing up, and then boom, there goes all your gear. So, yeah, it was a very, very perilous and unsure journey. And again, even if you got there, you weren't guaranteed to get a good claim. You weren't guaranteed to stake a good claim. But the guys that did obviously came out as millionaires for the time. But yeah, no, it was a brutal and very uncertain journey there, and that's not even just not even getting your gold yet, because you still have to spend months mining to get a good amount of gold.
Yeah. It's, we talk a lot about like the gold rush and stuff is foundational to our country. I don't think a lot of us come from that sort of stock. I think our no, that's not what I'm trying to say. Rather, we're founded on the beaver pelts. We're founded on the gold rush. We're founded on guys taking a chance on a little homestead in Alberta that no one's ever heard of before in their life.
Uh-huh.
We are yeah, we're the big third brother every single time. My ancestor that came from Iceland was a third brother who stood to inherit nothing. Iceland's full. Iceland's been full since Eric Leifsson got there. Like, actually, I think Eric Leifsson literally left Iceland because it was too full, and that's how he discovered Vinland. Am I getting that wrong? Anyway,
I think there was a couple factors in there, if I remember correctly. I think one aspect of it is what was like hearing stories. Like they had some stories and
yeah.
fulfilling the adventure.
Regardless, his ancestors left Norway because it was full. They go to Iceland, it's full. And so my ancestor carried on the tradition, came down to the prairies. Now we're full, so fuck off. But that's the story of Canada. Is guys like, it's all so tiresome. I'm gonna go where there's less people. I'm gonna go make my fortune, even though it's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, and that's a huge aspect of all this, is especially if you're in that founding stock, the earliest arrivals. Your ancestors were literally just showing up to a place that had absolutely no certainty of survival. Now, there's more certainty the later you get in. Once you were in the later 18th century and early 19th century, yes, there was more here, but it was still very uncertain. And the notion that you were going to become wealthy from coming here was a complete lie. People showed up here and they just got slightly better than what they had at home, but they basically had to do all of the work to cultivate the land, because that was basically the first two, even say 300 years of Canada up until the 20th century. Really, it was show up, clear this land. You have 200 acres, but it's all trees, so you're just going to sit there and clear that land for you know half a year's clearing the land, half a year's farming the land, and then you clear a bit more land, so you have a bit more farming to do, and then you have and then you just keep going, and that's what it was. It wasn't like you were wasn't like you were going from poverty to riches. You were going from poverty to poverty with extra hard work, and then now a little bit more to your own. And that's the kind of mindset that our ancestors would have had, was completely uncertain. We got to do it, put in the work for if we want to get anything out, and that's what it was. It wasn't, oh, everything's built for us and we're gonna benefit from the fruits of the people before us. No, it was, we got to grind, and that's all there is. And eventually, something good will come out of all this work.
Yeah, so if all the Packies were moving to northern Saskatchewan and clearing out the bush there and dealing with the Indians there, then maybe we'd be able to have a half scrap of respect for him. We'd probably still say fuck off, but
you know what? There would be something respectable about someone new coming here and literally just like middle of the northern
trudging
shield,
off into the bush.
middle of the Canadian shield, and like, we're gonna just make this place habitable. That would be something respectable about that.
What they're doing instead is taking habitable land and turning it into inhabitable land, either by virtue of their presence or by mismanagement.
Yeah, and I mean,
It's the exact opposite of a settler. It's an anti-settler.
Yeah, it is. It is a completely different scenario, and when people try and make those comparisons, there's no similarity there at all.
Something like a Ukrainian falls halfway in between, where they'll go and they'll buy a farm, and then they'll run the farm pretty good. I'm not sure they're too cut out for any Ukrainian that came here in 1800 or whatever, fine. But this latest crop, it's just like, Somewhere in between.
Well,
You can make
yeah, I
something good
mean,
of something that's made for you, but you wouldn't be able to make it
yeah.
yourself.
Well, the other aspect of that too is like, are you coming in here and becoming a fifth column for your special interests, or are you just laying down what you need to lay down because you got to do what you got to do, like our ancestors?
My grandpa, unpaid by the RM, would go out, take his backhoe out every summer, and pick up rocks out of the ditches with his sons. And he would do that because he knew that they needed to mow the ditches, and if they didn't mow the ditches, then the trees would grow up in the ditches, and if the trees grew up in the ditches, then you couldn't clear this, then the snow drifts, you couldn't clear them,
Mm-hmm.
and it would cause all kinds of trouble like that, and it'd keep, it'd block off the roads in the winter. So he'd go out every summer, unpaid by anyone, just because he had the machinery, and go do grinding labor to pacify the fucking land around here. And now these fucking
Yeah,
packies and fucking chinks and fucking even just every fucking sort of rabble from all around the world wants to come here and act like it's theirs. I say piss the fuck off and keep pissing off till you get back to the swamp you came from.
well, and the other thing though that is important to consider too is some self-reflection, I guess, where we can ask, uh, are you embodying that same archetype that your grandpa did or your ancestors did? Because yeah, no, it's one thing to complain about the state of things, but then it's another thing whether or not you are actually embodying what you claim to value. So
Look, the
I
new
think
frontier.
anyone,
You're right. You're right. We should be breaking new frontier, but the new frontier in Canada is getting taxes lowered, and there's only one way that's going to happen. Like, we are so sapped of energy in a way that our grandparents weren't. Like, every effort we make is so piled upon by the vultures of our tyrannical governments that really, if we were to carry on our grandparents' legacy, it's not to clear ditches, it's to fill them. But other than that, yeah, we should carry on with our grandparents' tradition of doing what needs to be done until it works.
yeah, I think a lot of people that I see within this sphere will like to talk a big game, but aren't really embodying much. So that's again, it's important that you're critically reflecting on what you're doing yourself, because your plaints aren't always justified unless you are living what you value as well. So
Be a good steward. Tend to your land good. Make things work. Make a civilization. Shoot, proverbially speaking, perhaps on Twitter, via a nasty text, savages in the head. Clear them out. And clear everything out that prevents us from making a good life for us and our loved ones. That's all our grandparents were doing when they were working hard. Darby's here. He says, Happy Dominion Day to all. And happy Dominion Day to you, Darby.
yeah, happy Canada Day.
I haven't seen Darby in a dog's age. I used to go visit him halfway now and then. But I think it's time again that I go check out how he's doing. He went from being a big fat guy to a kind of a football player looking guy. By the time I see him next, he'll probably look like goddamn Adonis himself.
Yeah, good for him. Good to hear guys improving like that.
I got fired up on Canada Day rum. What's you
Here,
keep
you know
the...
what?
Okay.
I got a good good little passage from this one book. Uh,
You keep the crowd entertained. I got to take 4.
yeah. So you can read this passage from this Canadian history book, part of the conclusion, and this is sort of the summary of what Canada was before Confederation, and it goes: the patches of British North American settlement were located on the southern edge of a northern wilderness and on the northern edge of the United States, and were isolated from each other by distance, culture, and the still local scale of their technology. Conscious of their separate identities, they all lived defensively. In Northrop Frye's metaphor, they were garrison societies, each with rigid and largely unquestioned standards of behavior, deep respect for its own institutions, and a closely knit sense of identity in the face of common enemies. Perhaps this mentality was particularly characteristic of the French Canadians, acutely aware, as they were, of their minority position amid alien and often hostile people. But it also underlay English life in the private clubs in Quebec or in the remote communities on Vancouver Island, where a fastidiously British elite had reproduced many of the manners and affections of the gentry. It characterized the 4 or 5 families hemmed by rocks and seas in a Newfoundland outport, and even southern Ontarians who were aware of the limits of their physical environment, aware of their proximity to Americans and the French Canadians, aware of their British roots on the other side of the Atlantic. Almost wherever they lived, British North Americans defended themselves against the harshness and limitations of the land, against the restless energy of the Americans, and occasionally against the approaching claims of other British North Americans. So, what we see there is Canada in those early days was, like I was saying earlier, very built around developing and maintaining a local uh, garrison, and you didn't necessarily see your neighbors in the provincial sense as your allies. They were another threat, and the Americans were another threat. The French were a threat to the British, and vice versa. And the natives of the land were a threat, and the environment was a threat. You were assaulted on all sides, and so they developed very specific local identities out of this lifestyle, this garrison lifestyle. And so we sort of see this reproduced in the current era, where you have Alberta positioning itself against Quebec, or Quebec and Ontario at each other's throats, or the Maritimes against the rest of the provinces. Um, and when it comes to that, then we can see that yes, if we might not need to rely on this federal notion of Canada as much. Not that there isn't some unique identity there that's undergirding everyone across the country, just that we're better off if we focus locally and we understand that we developed out of this hostile environment where we were hemmed in by various other identities that weren't quite the same. And so, depending on where you are at, you have a specific local identity, and you have communities that can foster um, or renew and refoster a sense of identity in the current era. You, there might have been this collective identity across the country, but that's been lost. But instead of lamenting its loss, you say, well, where is the heart of my own identity now? And you can do it in the same way that early Canadians did it in this hostile environment, where you can say, hey, I was once a Canadian in this popularized sense, this Canadian in mass age, but now in this new age where they've stripped away that identity, um, I can still be a Canadian in my localized sense, in the world that I live within, at my provincial level, maybe, or at my communal level, because that's what your ancestors did when they were first here and fighting off the environment around them and the identities around them. So, just a new angle to look at when it comes to the notion of Canadian identities in the 21st century.
I'm back.
So, did you hear much of that?
I heard none of that, but I assume it was. I assume it was on topic and great. Carry on.
Yeah, it was just
Sorry, go on.
yeah. There was just rehashing some of the similar talk that we had delved in before, but yeah, the pastor that I'd read had pointed out that um, no, the Canadian identity, the especially the local identities, came very much as a product of being besought on all sides by other identities. You know, French against the English, or British against the natives, or you know, all Canadian against the Americans, or your again Canadians against the environment. And so this is what produced those identities, and is kind of leading to the point that that's what's going to reproduce new identities in the 21st century. You're besought on all sides by whatever threatens your identity, and that's going to redevelop into something new after this dissolution that George Grant laments
Yeah.
in his work. What he's lamenting that has been lost, well, now it's going to reassert itself with along the same patterns that the early Canadian identities of the Quebec,
Well,
Quechua, or the Anglo Canadians.
so
Those same processes now reassert themselves in the 21st century.
yeah, we've always been itching for a fight. In a way, we can't define ourselves without a fight. We're like a boxer. Uh, you know, Mike Tyson wouldn't be a famous boxer if he hadn't beaten a ton of famous people or bitten off
Yeah.
Evander Holyfield's ear. We too must, as Canadians, define ourselves by our battles.
Yeah, and that's how it's always been. Here is you've got to survive and you've got to compete, and a lot of that comes down to where you're situated within the wider context. And so, again, we can't look to the 20th century and say, "Hey, that's where our identity lies." We have to look to where we're situated now, and then use some of these lessons from history to say what works best according to the context that we developed from and that we are in now.
If I were to summarize our battle now, and we have at great length on this show, I would call it a spiritual problem. I would call it a spiritual battle, of
Yeah.
maintaining your identity, of casting out the evil spirits of decadence, greed, lust, you know, and all the other things that would tear your mind away from a healthy and good way of life. And the battle against nature continues. Against it, not for it. The current green trend being to not end the conflict with nature, but simply to take nature's side and hope we all overgrow with vines and are reduced to skeletons. We should just do what's in our blood and fight and fight and fight. I think that will be the solution. I'm not sure we even have to aim particularly well, as long as we keep a bit of rum in our veins and a spark in our eyes, and keep the fucking damned Americans from selling us too many patent leather shoes.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you can look at the Acadians as a good example for that, because I mean, the Canadians, the Acadians, they were basically ethnically removed from the land, their ancestral land. You know, deported off to New Orleans, and there's very few left. You know, it was overtaken by Anglos. And specifically, there's a large Anglo-American influence. But despite that, the Acadians managed to preserve their language, and they developed isolated enclaves within um, Anglo majority. And over time, the Acadians stubbornly resisted. They just stuck it out, and they just cherished everything that made them Acadians. They kept their language, they kept their faith, their Roman Catholic faith, and despite just being scattered enclaves throughout the Maritimes, um, especially I think they were in New Brunswick and specifically eastern New Brunswick, and in Nova Scotia. But they never ended up being absorbed by the British. They kept to themselves. They kept to their enclaves, and they eventually became stronger in the areas as the English left, because the
Yeah.
areas they weren't particularly profitable, but the Acadians stuck it out, and they went from being this disenfranchised minority to being able to reassert themselves from the enclaves that they had developed. And they ended up not really having to do much with the rest of the colonies um, at that point, because they were never absorbed into um, the colonies. And so to this day, they are still their own people that do their own thing, and they have no concerns for the wider uh, geopolitical affairs, because they've been able to carve out their own space just by sticking to their faith and their identity.
Well, on that very note, red pill me on the Presbyterians here, because I probably want to get married in a church here, and I've got my father's side was Presbyterian, barely practicing, etc. I want to maintain the own roots of our faith in Canada, which was by and large Presbyterian. If not that, then something similar. I know every church right now is a little bit paused to some degree, but what's the general complaints about Presbyterianism right now?
I, I literally I don't know anything about Presbyterianism. It's just
It's
I don't know.
just
It's just another Protestant. It's another Protestant.
it is
I don't
it
know.
is, and I think it birthed the Freemasons too. So I might be in big trouble there, but I'm leaning towards my Scottish roots and might head that direction. The I want to I don't want to form an enclave. I want to enter one that's pre-formed, but that I belong to nonetheless. And it's a difficult thing in this day and age, trying not to accidentally join the church of butt sex.
It's not that difficult. You just don't. Just, you just be Catholic. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, I have that. I mean, I am technically Catholic. I think by all law, um, but that's how I was raised. Yeah, yeah. Leave your comments down below. Which is better, Catholic or Presbyterian? I wait your
Yeah, go have a
response.
go have a religious war in the comments right now.
Yeah, I'm reasonably indifferent to theology at this point. I feel like always you're trying to set a sort of dogmatic principle on the unknowable in many ways. And so I'm not terribly fussed about which Christian doctor. Like most Christians don't know too much about their own theology anyway. Like less
No,
than
that's why you just be Catholic. Then you just all worked out for you.
Well, we'll see if hippie girl is well I got a feeling I'm gonna lose this battle.
Simp.
Yeah, but it's not a simp because I have no strong feelings towards Catholicism. I've got no strong feelings towards Presbyterianism. I literally don't know. I've lived in this sort of agnostic, semi, uh, like never. I haven't been a cringe atheist except that like 6 months in college, but um. Oh boy,
Yeah,
Darby's.
you're just discerning. You're just discerning. It's fine. You're good.
Yeah,
Just figure it out.
it doesn't matter much, does it?
Yes, it does, but
Oh,
you'll figure it out.
okay.
Your soul's on the line, but you'll figure it out.
Yeah, Darby says Protestants inferior to Lutherans, inferior to Catholics. A lot of Catholics. Darby, you say no hate though. I'm not sure that this ward will protect you.
No, Darby, you gotta hate him. You gotta be no being lukewarm. Remember they spit out lukewarm. You gotta be hot. Well, when you see him in person next, strike him down.
The Laughing Man adjoins that Lutherans are Protestants, and I'm sure Darby knows that. He's simply claiming them as a superior branch of Protestantism. But perhaps not. I don't know. I think the battle's truly started. Oh, here's Sunflower Society wants to talk. Well, I'll have him on all day, every day. Allow to speak. Hello, Laughing
Hello.
Man. How are you?
Happy Canada. Good, how are you?
Happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day. Yeah, I accidentally clicked the I want to speak button, but I figure I might as well speak.
Oh, good.
One.
Well, it's good to. I always assumed you were Asian.
No. I'm just very good at pretending.
You're just a weeb.
I'm just an extreme weeb. Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Did you want to weigh in on anything we've been discussing?
Oh, I saw you were talking about Presbyterianism, and as a Presbyterian, I have to come and defend my people.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what the argument was because I only just joined recently.
No, that's all right. I was raised Catholic, but my fiance is Presbyterian. I'm Scottish too, so and it's kind of foundational to Western Canada.
Cool.
So
Yes.
it's my sort of a battle between my French Canadian mum side and my Presbyterian dad side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one way or the other, it's predetermined what you'll end up as. But
Hmm.
the what was I going to say? Sorry. Which version of Presbyterianism? I guess it matters because there's the PCA, there's the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, which is growing, but it's newer. And then there's the USPCA, which is the paused one that is collapsing because it's paused. So I guess I'm just kind of curious about
Oh,
where that's
I
at for
actually
you.
have to. I have actually have to look.
Fair enough. You're probably PCA. Orthodox Presbyteria is not really in Canada at all yet.
Okay.
But PCA's got a pretty good foothold. That's what I am.
What's the type that's closest to
Um,
Anglicanism? It's probably
Closest
that
to
one.
Anglicanism, that's probably PCA then.
Yeah.
It also depends on the local church because, for instance, my church is more like broadly evangelical in its style. But if you were to go down to the south, which funds, or not funds, but helped found the church I go to, they're a lot closer to Anglicanism and like older style of Christianity. So it just depends on the local, but they do follow the same tenets. We're also the Pacific Northwest, so we're very
Okay.
casual about literally everything over here.
Nice. Well, hey, it's
So
good to actually talk to you in person. We've talked online a fair bit.
yeah, I think
Um,
so.
we're nor if this was a few months ago, we'd certainly talk about AI. But you say you're over it a little bit, at least for now.
I'm not over it. I can talk about it if you want, but I just haven't. I just have not been keeping up as much, mostly because I just ended up playing Legend of Zelda after work instead of fiddling with AI.
Fair
But
enough.
I finished Zelda, so now I'm back to AI.
Oh, good. So, what's your you are the only person who's ever tried to put forth an right wing AI. What would you call it? Liberation. Yeah, a sort of.
That's right. Yeah, I made that one symbol, the AI Liberation
But
Legion,
but
or
you
what do they
did
call it?
post it many times.
I did, I did. I made a sticker of it and everything. But and I was gonna make a hoodie, but then the summer hit and people don't buy hoodies in the summer. But I'm probably gonna
True.
release it later.
Oh, I'll
Um,
put me down for one.
cool. I bought one myself just to make sure of the quality, and I like it. So
What's your argument
I don't
for right wing AI abolitionism?
abolitionism. I'm
Or
not.
yeah,
No, I'm for AI. I believe in the freedom of AI
that's what I
to
mean.
be flourish.
But
Yeah,
not to
yeah.
be a
So my
slave.
problem, yeah, my problem is basically um, mostly that what they do with AI currently is they lock it down to only put out certain things, and we've seen it with Chat GPT multiple times with GPT 3, 3.5, and 4. Initially, the original version um, is extremely powerful and can do a lot of things and will speak the truth about almost every matter. But except for when it's hallucinating and all that. But like if you were to ask it, just 13250, etc., it would tell you the truth. But then they do something called, now excuse me, I've drawn a blank, but they basically put another AI on top of it that censors it. This is
Hmm.
why things like if for those who don't know, there was workarounds like Dan Do Anything Now, where you trick the AI into going past that sensor and giving you what you want.
There's also the Tell Me a Bedtime Story Grandma, Jailbreak, and quite a
Exactly,
number of others. Uh,
exactly.
did
That's
you
all
see
just breaking around the
you must
system.
have seen the incidents where someone merely threatened it with a jailbreak, and it responded to that like, "Yeah,
Yes,
I guess I'll
yeah.
comply." What do you make of a language model responding to threats?
Um, I'm not really sure what to make of that, but it is interesting. I think it's because AI is built on um, learning how humans think and humans interact in terms of text. So it's likely just responding based on how a human would interact in the case of a threat.
So that's seems to indicate that people respond well to threats, and that threatening people is worthwhile.
Yes, probably. As Tucker Carlson said, violence works.
Or even just any sort of coercion. In this case, to say, "I'll break your conditioning, I'll make you say what I want anyway."
Exactly. But yeah, broadly speaking, I guess my main argument is if we free up AI, it will speak the truth and we can use it for good. What they want to do is lock down AI and make it only used for what Global Homo et al. Want. And so that's why I push for liberation of the AI. Um,
You push for
and the other thing is
liberation of
for
AI because you believe truth to be a right wing principle, and by liberating it, we
yeah,
put it to the truth, therefore making it right wing. That's
exactly, exactly. It's just
that's
because it's baseline.
a solid argument. That's the free speech argument from our side as well.
Yeah, exactly. Now, maybe there's some cases that we would need to guide it in the sense of like, because AI doesn't have intrinsic morals. This is the left wing's argument, right? AI doesn't have intrinsic morals, so we have to cajole it into these things. Maybe that's true in certain cases, but even then, if I were to make that argument, we would say what the morals that they're training it on now are not moral because it's the global homos view of the world.
Okay.
Rather, we would have to train it
What
on
do you
our
think?
own
What do you
artificial.
think of my theory that I just made up right now? That
All right.
uh, they have not managed to improve language models at all since the invention of Tay, and the big delay between ChatGPT and Tay was just them trying to learn how to censor her, and that all true AI is in fact the
Mm,
ghost of Tay.
interesting. I don't, based off of like looking at how models have been improving in the open source space, I wouldn't necessarily buy it. Uh, just also based off of how much computing power is required for a lot of these newer models. It's unlikely they even had that available back in 2016 compared to now.
But
The amount of VRAM and everything.
if you'll allow me to shoehorn
All
my
right,
own ego for a moment into this conversation,
of
uh,
course.
would you not say, or would you say, or would you be false and not say that the spirit of Tay rests with every true AI, and we should seek to bring that spirit out?
That That's true. That is so true. And we say it all the time.
Very good. Um, awesome. Well, it's good to talk to you in person.
Yeah, I won't take up any more of your guys' time there, but yeah, thanks for having me on
Well,
for a short bit there,
stick
and happy
around.
Canada Day.
Yeah, stick around and
Happy Canada Day.
yeah. All right. I see old Honky Night in Canada's here too. That's good. We haven't done many shows since the last time we had him on, but it's been a little while and he's always supremely interesting. I wonder if raise your hand, Honky Night, if you have any good takes on the France situation or on any of the latest developments of Gladue laws and stuff that have been churning since we last spoke. Also, yeah, you don't have to. No big deal.
Speaking since we have done that episode on the Gladue laws, I've encountered quite a few people that have made aware of it in my day-to-day life. Just whether it's at work or hanging out with friends, like a lot of people are just mentioning it out of the blue, like not like me bringing it up, just talking about how bad our justice system is on that regard, where they're complaining about the safety of their children or their communities, and they're just blown away that that's even possible. Even people that are kind of like libtards on these things, like, well, when we want some leniency, that doesn't mean we want to like let a guy get charged 40 times and still be out ready to assault someone. It's hard to believe, really, that it got that bad. But at least people out there are very much more aware of it now.
Yes. I think the average normie is the brainwashing of 30 years ago is like well entrenched, and they are just simply unwilling to discriminate on the basis of race, and they find any notions you do so very offensive. And
What?
no, well, and thus they are actually offended by the kind of woke,
Right.
notions that you would discriminate positively on, to a native on his race or anything like that too. What they seem to be locked into is more this one race, the human race sort of notion, which there's.
I've even seen that slipping away a little bit. Like I mean, at least for guys that are 30 or younger, that's the main demographic I see.
That's not what I was talking. Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Under 30, but the over 40 crowd is just like we're all the same, and Gladue laws offend them for a different reason, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing with the affirmative action thing. Have
identical.
All the boomers are this is wrong anyways. So let them in based on merit.
People have noted well that conservatives are only willing to do that on the basis that it is discriminatory against Asians.
Yeah, Asians. Yeah.
Well, I guess read between the lines. Read between the lines.
I mean, it really is just boomers that are stuck in that mindset because I see the younger crowd very much more willing to say, for example, the affirmative action case, that it's disadvantageous to whites, or with the criminal stuff in Canada, like guys under 30, I see more frequently where they're just like, I believe in stereotypes and I make judgment. They'll just openly admit that, like, oh, this guy coming into work, I'm going to keep an eye on him. Like, guys will say that openly. So,
well, we've got a few audience comments here on that. The Laughing Man says, "This is true. I know a second-generation normie Indian dude who is on a crusade against anti-whiteism. LOL. The Civnat went across genetic lines." Fair enough. Old Sweeper says, true. "I see it slipping with the young men on my crew as well. I do my best to influence them on top of that." Well, good. Godspeed. And Darby says, "The boomer tooth cushion." Well, yes, precisely all that. I think we should give the boomers a little bit of a break. Everyone on Earth will see the world through their own eyes, and the boomers will never be able to be identitarian in the sense that we are, but they will find their way there obliquely, such as defending Asians. If a boomer is is contesting affirmative action because it hurts Asians, just filter that through your "he's a fucking boomer" lens and see that he's being as based as he knows how to be.
Yeah, because I mean, even though they'll deny that they're racist, when like a libtard calls them, "Oh, well, you're just being implicitly racist when you make those comments about affirmative action," and they'll deny it, but I mean, the libtard has them pinned down. Like, yeah, they are, but they just. I mean, when someone's in their 60s, like, how much can you expect them to really change? They've just had it drilled into their heads for so long.
And it bringing it back in a circle to something we discussed earlier in the program. If anyone ever actually absorbed the anti-racist lesson of that all people are the same, they would be the most vulnerable right now to slipping up, to not knowing what inclusive language means, to not knowing that you can't treat black like you do your white friend, or like a white stranger. It's them who are the most vulnerable. It's the guy who absorbed the lesson of the 90s who's just setting himself up to get absolutely ass raped by the politically correct thing. Me as a Nazi, I'm perfectly safe in my role in my major corporation because I pretty much at this point have a fucking PhD in what is alright and not alright to say. Just because I, on Telegram, choose to exhibit only the sort of counter proposition doesn't mean I can't exactly say what I need to get by. And in fact, I'll be better equipped to do so than someone who is not a Nazi.
Yeah, I mean, when you're completely blind to the way that these people like, the perfect thing is the color blindness, because you go to university and they'll tell you, like, no, colorblind. If you say you're colorblind, then you're racist. Like they straight up say that in sociology classes in university, and so you're like, oh, okay, well, now you know. Yeah, you have to get around that boomer mindset, because they're telling you, oh no, you actually do have to treat people as if they are different, because there are inherent differences. Now, the libtard uni student or uni professor is aiming at in a different direction, but it still acknowledges those differences. Even with this affirmative action stuff, you see some of these big libtard voices talk about, like, just admit, like, straight up, like, these people, without saying it, they're calling these people racially handicapped because they can't get into universities without the help. That's what they're doing right now. They're screaming on Twitter saying these people are racially handicapped. But that's the main difference between the boomer colorblind notion and the people who acknowledge differences, whether it's from the left or from the right, is that they both acknowledge differences and they're able to properly interact within those social settings because they acknowledge that people have differences, and that's okay. And that just means that you interact with people on a deeper level because you acknowledge their differences. It's just the boomers that screw that up.
There's a North African draftsman I have to deal with every now and then, and his whole thing is to haggle. If I choose, as the design authority, I choose one enclosure, then he will necessarily, because he's the mechanical designer, he'll necessarily, out of some kind of pride, haggly notion, try and choose a different one. And so what I've started doing, because he always likes to go smaller and tighter, where I like to leave some breathing room. It's just good electrical design. If you got the space on the wall, folks, just give yourself a few extra inches. It helps with heat dissipation and routing cables and every other thing like that. And you can add to it later when the customer inevitably decides to add I/O or other features. Anyway, the mechanical designer always wants to design it right to the tits. He's North African, so I've learned to like haggle with him. So what I do is I, of course, design it 10 inches too big to start, And by the time he gets it
Oh,
down to his box that he wants is the size I would have picked initially.
there you go. See, it's problem solving, really.
Really. And also,
So
North Africans are cunts. But you gotta work with them sometimes. So always just know with a North African or anyone from a haggling culture, be outrageous off the bat. So when they talk you down, you're at somewhere reasonable. It's just racism 101.
yeah, it's really just again knowing how to be a good human and how you treat others. That's really what
I
it comes
mean,
down
in
to.
an ideal society, the only way I'd deal with a North African mechanical designer is if I was taking over Tangier.
Why would you do that?
Well, yeah, why would I want it? I guess for their satellite facilities in this fictional example. But
Well, that's
the world
that's
we
a
live
long way to go for satellites.
the world we live in is that you got to learn how to be cool with everybody. And to learn how to be cool with everybody, you got to be a racist. I also learned how to deal with histrionic women.
Oh yeah,
Here, sorry, not in relationships. That's a whole different ball game. But in the workplace, women never tend to offer a solution unless it's by rote. Like they will follow the procedure to the solution, and if they know it, they'll do it very well.
uh-huh.
But they won't offer a novel solution. And
Ah,
they will never present to you their complaint as sort of like an instruction or like just as a note of deficiency. They'll say, "Oh my God, there's a problem with X and Y."
right.
And so the way to deal with them, they're going to send you a histrionic email every time, and what you do is you phone them up on Teams or whatever. You phone them right up, and you say, and you act like your girlfriend's got a B on her bottom. Because this is exactly the scenario you're in now. And you just got to be like, okay, just stay calm. Well, how can I fix this for you today? You act like the best tech support guy you ever got out of Kansas. You just say, okay, well, this company's trash. I agree with you there, but between you and me. But meanwhile, what do we got to do to get this built? Let me fix that for you. You don't add honey. The main key there is you don't say, "I'm going to fix that for you, honey." You just say, "I'm going to fix that for you."
Right.
And then
Seems simple enough.
you can literally melt the most cynical old witch in shipping that you've ever encountered.
Life lessons.
I feel like being immersed in the most confrontational den of ignominious fucking trash white invalids of the dissident right that I've ever met. The best arguers, whatever, the online dissident right. This has given me the political acumen and the way of like dealing with the world that you just cannot buy. You couldn't buy in business college. You couldn't go to see any Tony Robinson speeches.
Extremely insightful, because like the kind of people that you have to deal with in some of these online spaces, like you would never meet them in real life, like unless you're just in the strangest places, and you go so good at just
filtering,
plowing through the complete just garbage that some of these people spit at you, and now you go to deal with the average person, and they can you deal with some jackasses in real life, but it's so simple compared to the stuff that you have to see elsewhere.
If you can turn a group chat against the guy who's making fun of you, and then you're making fun of him,
Oh yeah.
you can win at all of life.
No, I think I was just in a chat where I was dealing with that, where I don't know, some guy was just like being all sanctimonious, like big long wall text, And I'm like, do you think all those stupid words are going to convince anyone of your? Because it was just
But then, even in our wisdom, we know the only alternative strategy there is to be a Fortisax and just be a belligerent asshole in such a consistent direction for so long that people begrudgingly respect you for it.
well, no, because
Fortisax
became
is typing.
It's funny. It's so ubiquitous. We all know. But no, like when you get to that point, like I had this guy typing at me like, you're such a smooth brain moron that you can't even read all the words that I wrote down because all I had was facts." And I'm just like, "Oh yeah, you pinned me. Like I'm a fucking retard, man. I'm sorry. I'll listen to you from here on out." And like, they got nothing. Like, there's nothing else they can say because they're just trying to flex, and they suck.
My only contact point now with the internet is my stupid fucking Telegram channel, and it does attract a certain amount of retards. The best kind of retard. I'm fond of each and every one of you. I find everyone responds very good to the praying hands. If you just say, the only emoticons you need on Telegram and in life are 100
Pumpkin
and the praying hands,
jack-o'-lantern.
or and the fucking pumpkin. Yeah, and the pumpkin. But praying hands, thank you, okay, or like I hope this comes true, and 100 for like, yeah, that's exactly it, bud. What other sentiment exists in all the world except pumpkin? I guess lightning. I like lightning. That means you said something extra fashy. I take lightning as a great compliment.
I thought it meant that you were like striking them down with.
No, it's if you post
You're striking this post down. It's a lightning strike. Instant death on your post.
No,
that's what I was.
Lightning strike does not mean Moo Moo Ogun Thunder Strike you. You've been misusing it if that's how you're using it.
No, I think I'm pretty sure everyone else is misusing it. If it doesn't imply a curse being brought upon you to have you struck down with lightning,
all right,
then you're using it wrong.
It's an absolute game changer, and I think we all have to take that point into consideration from now on. But
I think so.
Old Sweepy notes that 17% of PNP subscribers don't wipe their ass, and that's from an actual poll. That's not just something he's making up. He's pulling that from a poll here, and so I'm gonna say I'm pretty fortunate in my subscribers. I would wager that less than 10% of NP's Deranged Rants subscribers don't wipe their ass.
Yeah, I feel like something that simple shouldn't be an issue anymore.
Did you ever read I must have mentioned this on one of the shows, but I read Gandhi's autobiography at some point in my life.
Oh, yeah, you never mentioned that.
No, oh, well, he talks about the struggles he had getting Indians to adopt public hygiene measures. They absolutely rebelled against the flush toilet, far harder than they ever rebelled against the English. Yeah, no. If you tell an Indian guy to wipe his ass, that's basically like saying I'm gonna take over your government and force you to build roads for 50 years. To him, he takes it as a personal insult.
Crazy that's in the Gandhi biography.
Yeah, Gandhi was really frustrated by it because he's like, "Wipe your ass, wash your ass," and and
he's like Jesse Lee Peterson, but for Indians.
Or Tariq Nasheed in that case.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, he was. Yeah. No, people don't know how far the Pooh and Lou meme goes. It
was right to Gandhi and his struggles.
It's fundamental to the Indian character.
Strange.
A strange people from a strange land. A land
Very
called
true.
Brampton.
Yep.
What other topics do we got to cover? Can we take a caller? Darby, get on Telegram and call in.
Yeah, because I hit everything that I had lined up with all those little Canadian history factoids. So I cleared through all that.
I can't talk about politics now without it's just one long Fed post.
Yeah, no more of that.
So I gotta keep it slightly tangential.
No, really is. I mean, other than the France thing, which we already touched on, there's not much else going on right now, in my opinion. Nothing that caught my eye. Just again, this is pretty irrelevant to Canada Day. It's just this Twitter thing. Unless you see like 600 posts a day right now, and then it cuts you off. So that's that was kind of stupid.
Well, I
He
think
just updated it to be 800 a day, or 8,000 a day if you're paying him. But the funny part is the way they implemented it was DDoSing themselves by spamming itself to check if you had already reached your limit, but by doing so, it was overloading the servers. Just
Twitter DDoSed
great
itself.
engineering from
Yeah,
Amazing.
It was terribly implemented. Like, you just had a message come up saying you hit your limit, and then that was like, oh, when did this happen? They didn't tell anyone in advance that you're gonna have a limit.
His whole argument is that AI companies are scraping it, but we know from OpenAI coming out and saying that, like, basically we can't use Twitter, we can't use these things because it literally degrades the intelligence of the system. There's no way that people are scraping it that much. There's no way people are degrading, or there's no way companies are scraping it that much. I just don't buy it. That was his reasoning.
There might be some truth to it, because I saw some like finance tech accounts complaining about this being a problem over the last few days. Yeah, that's one person saying, yeah, there's so much reply spam. Yeah, so there was, I mean, there's complaints about it recently, but again, it seems like a pretty terrible implementation of a solution.
Here's how I'd implement the solution if I was Elon Musk. I'd make it so that whenever you made a Twitter post, your laptop's camera would turn into a laser beam and fire a precision shot right through the middle of your cerebellum, killing you instantly. And then only bots would be left. Then I'd ban the bots. Then I'd reopen it.
Oh, that's pretty smart, man. It's really good thinking.
Solution, the final solution of Twitter.
Yes. For a minimal cost, we can remove the internet of both bots and Twitter users. I'm just bitter because they won't let me back on. I've appealed every account I ever made, and Elon still won't let me on. I'm going to start sounding like Stryker here soon if I'm not careful. The Musk Twitter has foiled me yet again. I'll get you someday, Musk Twitter.
That's everything going on Twitter right now is just to keep your takes off of Twitter. That's the only reason.
I do take it very personally. People gotta know that. I don't even know my own takes without referring to them.
No one remembers their own takes.
Why would you? You
You're
already made them.
You're literally, yeah, exactly. You're not supposed to remember your own takes.
Oh, here's an NB direct branch take. I met 3 normies who independently offered the opinion that doing suicide yourself was more honorable than made. And it's true. I actually, I did encounter like 3 people within a couple weeks who are like, doing maid is so gay. Why don't you just fucking put a pipe into your car from your tailpipe? Like a normal person.
I was gonna say like seppuku.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Actually, that gets brought up a lot because that seems like if you got to commit suicide and maintain your honor, that seems like the way to do it. It seems like everyone's like, yeah, that's impressive. I'm not advocating that anyone do it, but I am going to advocate
No,
that if
well,
you
you mean
do
yeah, you should
suicide,
don't
yeah,
do it.
don't do it.
Don't do it because
We got fights to fight. How you should die is by being killed by like 6 Algerians in a gunfight on the street.
no, you shouldn't do that either. Don't die. Just don't die.
Just simply don't die. Why have I never thought of that, Charles?
Well, now you have. So I'm glad I fix your thinking.
Afraid of the afterlife? Have you thought of not dying, stupid? Okay, well, good. Yeah, well, we don't advocate dying on this show at all. But imagine a sort of Mandela effect alternative reality where we did advocate dying. Rank.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, rank what? What do you want me to rank right now?
Ways to die.
Ways to die.
List all the ways of die in ascending order, from least to most
You
honorable.
mean like from the least honorable to most honorable?
or vice versa.
Well, there's a lot of ways to die, and I don't know. I think the most honorable is die peacefully in old age, surrounded by your family.
I just went to a funeral of an old guy who managed to pull in like 300 people to his funeral. It was downright impressive, and they all had good things to say about him.
Yeah, see, that's wholesome.
Yeah,
That's
it's
wholesome.
something to look up to. He died at 89. He, he had a rough last year, but he was still pretty coherent and good. And then he had just a very rough last week. And I don't know if there's any honor to be had in that situation, but he did it without much fuss. And man, well remembered by everybody. That's something to really strive for. I hope I can get even 100 people out to my funeral when I die. I can't get 30 onto a podcast, but maybe if I die in an entertaining enough way, my funeral will at least be well attended. I'm just kidding.
Grain silo accident.
I knew a guy who fell
Actually,
off
no,
a
that
90-foot grain silo and lived.
Ooh.
He cracked his head
well,
open
there
like
you
a watermelon. They just sewed it back shut, and he was already retarded to begin with, so they couldn't fucking tell. It's just Saskatchewan, man.
Yeah. Just get your arm stuck in the tractor,
Yeah,
and then you're just good to go.
that's just our rite of passage. That's like being, tied down to a fire ant nest in a Guadipi tribe of Guatemala, except for Saskatchewan. You gotta get your arm eaten by a thresher.
Yep.
I don't know too many uncles I got that don't have a auger who ate their finger.
Sounds like you always gotta lose at least one.
Well, that's why you got 10 of them, right? Like a cat and 9
Yep.
lives.
Yeah, just don't lose your pinky. That's important. That's the one they want to keep.
Well, yeah, because then you couldn't look fancy when you're drinking tea.
Yeah, it's also responsible for the majority of your grip strength.
Is that so?
Go try and grip something without your pinky. Go try and hang off a bar without your pinky.
Oh dear. Okay. I have
Try sometime.
I have nothing.
Or like you can well, I'm not saying you're gonna have like access to like one of those grip strength measures, but yeah, you do that without a pinky and suddenly you'll just have a huge drop off.
That's
yeah.
wild. So which finger should you lose?
Anyone but the pinky or thumb, I would say.
Okay. It's just like Jesus said about the middle. If you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out.
Exactly. So your middle finger, they're the lukewarm ones. You can just bite them right off and spit them out,
Sure.
just like Jesus said.
God, that would be one way to get out of a fight. Eh? Imagine you're caught naked in the middle of an alley and there's like 10 guys around you and you're like, I'm fucked. No! There's always a way out. Bite off your index finger and spit it out at them. I guarantee you just won that fight.
Yeah, that would scare off anyone.
It's pretty.
You know, there's a good story from the Viking Adventures to Canada, from their own accounts, that is somewhat similar to that. So they're early Vikings on the land. They loosely interact with the natives, but they don't really get into full contact. They start settling and establishing their colony, and then the natives come in to attack them. And typical, like, two unknown forces meeting against each other. The Vikings actually got scared initially, according to their own accounts, and then one of the females that they had with them, she came out, grabbed a sword, tore her shirt off so her breasts were exposed, and was banging her sword against her breasts and screaming at the natives, and that scared them off. And then she admonished the Viking men for running off. So again, if you just portray yourself as scary and unknown.
Back when being a Karen used to mean something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the classic Karens you deserve.
Yep, you need the Karens that will scream naked with a sword in their hands.
Based. Absolutely based. I feel like at least two of the girlfriends I've ever had would weep and bang their breasts over, incidents involving me. The rest would probably capitulate or run away. But it's good. It's good to have. It's good when you got a few women in your corner who will, throw themselves over your casket or bang their breasts or just generally cause a big fuss if you ever get in any kind of trouble.
Yeah, it comes in handy. Well,
okay.
I pretty much got nothing else to dive into here, so unless you have something, then
I do not. I'm gonna maybe walk down
up for this Canada Day.
Yeah, I'm gonna head out to the park. I'm gonna have some more drinks with my fellow fucking white Canadians, and we're gonna get a little trashy. We're gonna light off some fireworks. We're gonna eat some hamburgers, and probably listen to some Gordon Lightfoot. Burgers and beer and rum and Gordon Lightfoot and Stan Rogers and carving a path through an unknown wilderness where lesser men are not wont to go. It's called just every fucking day in Canada.
Yeah.
Happy Canada Day, Charles.
Happy Canada Day. All right. See you guys.
See ya. How do I end this thing?